Good morning. If you'd like to follow along with the reading, I'll be reading from Ephesians chapter 6, verses 1 through 3. That's Ephesians chapter 6, 1 through 3. Children, obey your parents. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first command with promise, so that it may go well with you, and that you may enjoy long life on earth.
Good morning, everybody. Oh, you got more than that. We got energy big time after that Father Abraham song, don't we? Good morning, everybody. That's better. I came a long ways to see you guys, and I'm very privileged to be here. My wife and I are very happy to be back worshiping with you guys, especially as we are in this mini-series looking at the roles that God has appointed within the family unit. So today we're continuing on that dynamic between children and parents. But to introduce that, I have a question for you guys. Who here has ever been on a treasure hunt? Maybe some, oh, good. I see some hands. Maybe some of you haven't been in a long time and you're yearning to be back on another one. We're going to kind of go through one today. What does every treasure hunt need? Treasure is right. That's the big one, right? I mean, it should have something at the end of the line. I'm glad to hear that. But there's something else that it needs. It needs an actual map, or it needs clues. It needs some instruction to help the treasure hunter go from point A to point B, right? They need something to follow to reach their destination. Okay, now stay with me here. About 2 weeks ago, my wife and I, we had to take our youngest son, Tate, into an appointment in Winnipeg. And so what do? We have our oldest boy. He needs to nap during that lunch hour. And so what do? We call on our Manitoba grandparents. And they've stepped up for us a ton. I mean, we're blessed to have 80% of the boys' grandparents within a 30-minute range. Now you're thinking 80% of the grandparents. That might sound weird. I have some step-grandparents, so that's where that math accounts for. But we've leaned on our parents a lot, and they've always come through for us. They've always supported us. It's been a blessing for us. And so, that day, it was my dad who got the call first. It was kind of a joint effort. Both grandparents had a role to play in it. In fact, our oldest boy is being watched by Ash's parents right now. But my dad was up first that day, the Ides of March 15th. That was his 60th birthday, and we had him pinned down with my oldest boy. So what do? We want to give him a gift, and I'm thinking, I'm going to do it in a creative way. So I made a treasure hunt for him and our oldest boy, Fraser, to go through. 12 clues that led them up and down and around into every nook and cranny in our house. And after an hour, they had succeeded. Fraser had retrieved his Kinder Egg and little fuzzy toy, and my dad eventually had found his gift cards and card that we had gotten for them. So it was a success. They had reached the end of the journey. But what would have happened if I had taken away the clues or not given them a map? I mean, they'd probably still be looking for those things. And so that's why today, as we look into God's Word, we realize that the Bible itself is a treasure, but it is also the map that leads us to God. God has shown us, as children of His, the way to grow up. That is our title for today. Now, this is the message for everybody. We are coming from the child's point of view today. It's kind of the flip side to what Jay's lesson was last week, where it was looking more down from the parent to the child. Now, we got to flip it around and look from the children's view to the parent. To put this lesson together, I really had to think like a child. My wife tells me that I do that all the time, so this came very easily to me. I hope to grow out of that someday. But for the meantime, today we are looking from the child's point of view of God's expectation of the child. Our objective is to understand God's ideal for the Christian child inside the family unit with the family dynamic. If you remember last week when Jay was talking, he said that every parent, they want some things for their children. They want them to be happy. They want them to be strong, successful, fulfilled. That was kind of towards the beginning of his sermon. You might remember the end when he had the screen on there, we had the survey. The parent wants success in school for their child. They want success in fitness. They want them to be good with their finances. They want them to have a strong social and professional game. And most of all, most importantly, we agreed that the parent wants their child to be a mature Christian who serves God, who serves the church, and serves others. Now, as I was putting this together, I came across a verse in Luke that I thought really encompassed these things. And it might be a bit crazy, but I want to use this guy. I want to try him out as an example, and we'll just see how he does. It's a bit of a joke there. We're using Jesus. We know the example is solid here, right? So in Luke 2:52, it says this, "And Jesus kept increasing in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and men." Do you see how some of these things correlate with what a parent wants for their child, which is what we talked about last week? Success in school, increased wisdom. Physically, they were growing in stature. Favor with men, in the social world. Those around them thought highly of them, of their conduct. And most importantly, favor with God in pleasing Him. So Jesus here, He's growing physically, mentally, spiritually. And I got to say that this is the parents' and God's desire for children. But I want to dig a little deeper into this passage here. So first, a little bit of context. In this passage here, we have Jesus, Mary and Joseph heading down to Jerusalem for the Passover feast. Jesus is 12 years old. The feast takes place. Mary and Joseph turn around, and after a little while, they realize that Jesus is not in the caravan. He's not there. All right, so we got to turn around. They do so. They head back to Jerusalem. And where do they find Jesus? He's with the teachers of the day. He's asking them questions and listening to them. And Mary, she comes across him and says this, "Son, why have you treated us this way? Behold, your father and I have been anxiously looking for you." Now, I know this is really more so a lesson for the children, but I want the parents to learn something through this too. Do you see the rebuke, the kind rebuke that Mary gives here? She's asked Jesus a question. What would have happened if she went in there guns a-blazing, screaming and yelling at Jesus, grabbing him by the ear as he was kicking and screaming out of the presence of the teachers of the day? What would have happened then? Would Joseph maybe have piped up and said, "Hey, Jesus, you listen to your mom"? And Jesus would have been like, "Yeah, whatever, Joe, you're not my real dad anyways." Would that have been, what kind of scene is that? I mean, we've probably all seen something like that take place in a grocery store. But that's not what we see here. And Jesus doesn't react that way either. He simply reacts with a question of his own. He says, "Why is it that you were looking for me? Did you not know that I had to be in my Father's house?" Mary and Joseph, did you not know that I'm 12 years old now? And within Jewish custom, at the age of 12, that is when a boy became a son of the law and was expected to start learning these things. So we see that they have a miscommunication here, don't they? Have any of you ever had a miscommunication? Keep your hand down if you've ever had a miscommunication. That's easier because we have them, right? They're common. We see here that it says that Mary and Joseph, they did not understand the statement which he had made to them. How many people can get in that boat and not understanding what Jesus was telling them at the time, right? There's people today who can't understand what Jesus is trying to get across to them. But I really love this next verse, and I think it ties in this passage for us, and it's a great example for what we're about to tackle today. It says in 51 there, "And he went down with them and came to Nazareth, and he continued in subjection to them, and his mother treasured all these things in her heart." He continued in subjection to his parents. He was obedient to them. He honored them in this way. That word in the original language there for subjection, it means a submission involving recognition of an ordered structure, with the proper respect being shown to those involved. So we see here that even the Son of God submitted to his parents. What then is our excuse? What legs do we have to stand on? So as we've been marching through March here, we've really been looking at the family relationships, haven't we? We talked about marriage, first, the dynamic between a man and a wife, Now we've moved on to parents and children, and if we were to continue on, especially in Ephesians 6, we'd see that Paul does address the relationships within the workplace. But today, we are on the expectation of the child. And so we have our first verse of our text for today. In Ephesians 6:1, it says this: "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right." Okay. Short verse, not a lot of big words there. Remember, it's written to a child, could understand it. But we're going to tackle it a little bit. We're going to tear it down just a little bit. The address to children here, that term, it's not specific to an age or sex, but I think we can understand that it is written to those who are able to apply it, able to heed it. You know, it's not much good giving a command to a 2-year-old. I've tried it. I do it at home every day, and it's just like I'm not saying anything. He's getting a little better now, but this is written to those who can understand it. This word here, teknon, for children in the Greek, and when I said that this was a message for everyone, I don't want to lose anybody here. This is also the term that is used to describe the children of God, often in Scripture. So whether we are looking at it as an obedience to our earthly parents here in that near relationship, or in the larger scale relationship of our obedience as Christians to our Father in heaven, these things that we're talking about today are applicable in both. Just as a few weeks ago when Miles was talking about marriage and how the husband is to love the wife as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, we kind of have that overarching theme in the background. So for those of you maybe whose parents are no longer around, if you are a Christian, congratulations, you're in the right spot. But you also have this call to be obedient and to honor your Father in heaven. And by obeying our parents here on earth, we are doing that as well. So it is important. It is an imperative command. This is the first key that's going to help us open our treasure chest here. And an imperative really has some oomph behind it. It's got some force, right? The author there is making sure that we're grasping this. It's in line with the previous text that we would have looked at in Ephesians 5 and in 6 here, that it talks about kind of a theme of submission and authority. Now, I think no matter where we look, it's kind of a universal theme that children around the world are expected to obey their parents, right? You would go into a non-Christian household, and that expectation would be there. But in writing here, when Paul's writing here to the Christian household, it is all the more important, all the more fundamental here. The incentive we see there is that it is in the Lord. The Christian child's first and foremost subjection is to God, and that needs to be remembered. Because it's not an easy thing to obey our parents all the time, is it? It's a struggle. Especially in children, we see a lot of selfish thoughts. Sometimes that can be hard to grow out of. We wear the bracelets, what would Jesus do? But when we're in those times of me, we forget that we have it on. We don't consult what's on our wrists there. A child may be told, clean your room, please. And they don't see the reason. I'm the only one who stays in this room. I like it dirty. That's how it's going to be. Why do I have to do that? Because I said so, the parent replies. And now parents, I think that this, because I said so, might actually have some biblical background to it. As we see on the board there, for it is right. A command to clean your room does not supersede or go against any of other God's commands that I'm aware of. And if it's in line with God's word, if it's within the Lord, I think the child should obey that there. I think because I said so is an apt answer. Now, there's lots of different dynamics. You can have believing parents and unbelieving children, or you can have believing children and unbelieving parents. What would we do in that case if your parents don't believe? I believe the child is still called to be in obedience to their parents. They're called to be a witness. If their parent asked them to go rob a store, I think there's grounds for kickback on that, because that would be something that would not be within the Lord. That would go against God's command. But a Christian child can make a world of difference. They can be a great witness to their parents and those around them. I think we understand already that obedience is right. Therefore, disobedience is wrong, right? It is improper. We're not going to read all through here, but I want you to notice the highlighted and underlined words in yellow there. This is Paul writing both to the Romans and to Timothy. And these are things that are considered improper. You'll see some of those words on there. Haters of God, arrogant, boastful. inventors of evil. And what is fitting right in with that? Disobedience of parents is right in there. On the second one, he's talking about in the last days here, what will happen. There will be more disobedience, unholiness, haters of good. This is pretty serious that we see that disobedience isn't just a minor thing, but it's actually considered quite major. Maybe not more so than in the Old Testament. Look with me in Deuteronomy 21, beginning in verse 18. It says this: "If any man has a stubborn and rebellious son who will not obey his father or his mother, and when they chastise him, he will not even listen to them, then his father and mother shall seize him and bring him out to the elders of his city at the gateway of his hometown. They shall say to the elders of the city, 'This son of ours is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey us. He is a glutton and a drunkard.' Then all the men of his city shall stone him to death. So you shall remove the evil from your midst, and all Israel will hear of it and fear." That's big time. In the Old Testament, they went capital with the punishment. You know, if you're in an argument with your dad and he says, "Don't you leave this house," and the kid slams the door and says, "Watch me," and he walks off, you bet your neighbor heard that. You know what he's doing? He's doing this. He's getting that arm ready because there's going to be an old-fashioned stone throwing later that day because of disobedience, right? But there's a question here. Why are we in obedience? Is it out of fear that we're going to be ducking and dodging rocks if we don't obey? Is that why we obey God, out of fear that he could just snuff out our candle at any time? I don't think so. I don't think that's the main reason why we should be in obedience. How about reward? Do we obey our parents because they can reward us something? Maybe if you behave there, little Johnny, we'll take you through the McDonald's drive-through. Do we obey God for that reason, because he can grant us eternal life? I mean, maybe we're getting closer there. Certainly, he wants to do that for us, and that is a very tempting reward. Or, and I think this is the answer here, are we in obedience? Are we in subjection out of love to please our parents, and by obeying them, pleasing God? Of course, some teenager out there maybe will pipe up and say, "How long do we have to be in obedience for? It's getting old for me. Tired of that." I don't know. I couldn't really find anywhere in the Bible, not to say that it's not in there, but I couldn't really find anywhere where it put the hammer down black on white on when that obedience should end. Is it when you turn 18? Is it when you no longer live under your parents' roof? Is it when you are married and joined to another? I'm not sure. But I want to suggest that we might not need an answer to that. Because I think if we were looking at our obedience to our parents as a jail sentence, I think we are looking at it incorrectly. See, God's commands, right, we know that they are not burdensome. And they are given so that we thrive, not just so that we get along, but that we thrive, that everyone within the group, in playing their roles, that we thrive, that we do well, that we live in harmony with one another. And dare I say it, when everybody is doing their part, obedience, it can even be easy. It can even maybe be a pleasure. Let's give it a try. We're on to our second and final point here already. Our second key to open the treasure chest. Ephesians 6:2. Paul, quoting the Old Testament, says, "Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise." So we talked a little bit about how that debate out there, how long obedience should continue. I don't know if we would need to waste our time with that. But with honor, I don't think we can. I think honor is a beginning to end process. Okay? So what is honor? Simply, we look at it in a dictionary. It'll say that honor is having respect or high regard for someone. Or it is also having pride, feeling privilege or pleasure in doing something. I want you guys to think now, what does honor look like to you in your own minds? When you think of a moment when you honored someone or someone honored you, what does that bring up to your mind? What kind of feelings does that conjure up? I want you guys to think on that for a second. Now I'm about to reveal mine. All right? Honor in the imperative again. This is my thought when I think of honor. Now, some of you guys will know this. This is the Highway of Heroes, a section of the 401 highway in Ontario, close to the Canadian Forces base of Trenton, I believe. Maybe Jay's even been there. This is a powerful scene here. This is a funeral progression of a soldier who's given their life. I knew I shouldn't even have put the slide up there, because if the Truths song, that song started playing right now, I'd be misty up here. There's something in the air going around here. I know Jay was feeling it last week too. But this here is a powerful thing, and this is what I think of honor, when people have taken time out of their day to come and salute, to give respect to someone who has given the ultimate sacrifice. Okay? Honor is an important thing. This is one of the 10 commandments that Paul is referencing here, first stated in Exodus 20:12. And I was talking to Mr. Tim Locke here a couple weeks ago, and he said that, children need to find a reason to honor their parents. And I think that's brilliant, and I want to unpack that a little bit more. I think as children, we need to remember the sacrifices that our parents have made before us. Maybe it was when you're younger and you played a sport, and they funded your equipment and they brought you to games everywhere, right? Or maybe as you got older, they helped chip in so that you could get your first car, or maybe they lent some money so that you could put a down payment on a house. Maybe it was just time that they spent helping you with your homework or your trouble with your friends or something like that. If nothing else, your parents spent considerable amount of time on you in most cases. So how does that make you feel when you look back at that relationship with your parents? When you think about some of the things that they gave up for you, were you always in full obedience? Did you always honor your parents? I know for me, looking back, that's not the case, and it's not easy to look back at that sometimes. That's one reason that we need to be willing to honor our parents. But there's another very honorable quality that I want to lay out for you guys here, and this is if you have the fortune and the blessing of being brought up within a Christian household. There's a study here by the Barna Group, who I know we've seen used in the past here lots, and it was in 2018, 2019, that polled 650 Protestant and Catholic church leaders, pastors, priests, and it asked them this question at the top: whose responsibility is it for a child's spiritual formation and development? Now, there's lots on that screen there, but I just want you to focus on the parents and family. This is the Protestants screen of it. Can't even say the word. But the Catholic one was very similar. And so we see the rank there that parents hold. Almost 100% of the responsibility for the child's formation is viewed as coming from the parents first and foremost. Now, if they hold that kind of sway, is it positive or negative? Right? Because it could go either way. As we see here, it combines both. An average of 97% viewed that as a positive thing, that the parents in leading their children in a Christian household. It makes sense, right? As we go down the list, the church is another positive thing. The Christian community, also positive in raising a child. And then we see it start to steer away with friends, the peer pressure of the things that are of the world. And school, right in that same vein. And then who forget about it when we go into full-blown culture and society. The impact becomes more negative the further we get away from the church and from our immediate family. There. I think that's a pretty telling graph in this case here. I think it's pretty neat. I think we see that the parents' influence is very vital and very positive. Now, again, I'm sounding like Jay from last week where we're talking about the effect that the parents can have, but I want the children to be seeing this and recognizing it as a way that they should be honoring their parents. Having a believer lead you is a huge blessing. And I think what we need to do as children is need to rediscover that childlike view of our parents. You remember your view of your parents when you were younger? Your mom was the prettiest, she was the smartest. Your dad was the strongest, he could beat up your your friend's dad, no problem, right? But somewhere over time, where do we lose that? It seems to a lot to be in that teenage year where, I don't even want to be around my parents right now. They're so unhip and they're square and I just don't like it and they're embarrassing, right? Somewhere we lose that awe of our parents. I think it's important that we rediscover that, at least to a degree of it. So those views, they can change over time, But being brought up by a believer already sets you on such a strong foundation. Think about it. As a young child, you learn about honor and you learn about obedience from your parents, long before probably you even can understand who God is, right? In a lot of cases. And so when you have that foundation and you find out who God is and you take hold of that, you already kind of have a precursing knowledge to that. You understand what obedience and honor is about. It helps us bridge that gap. And it's a big clue on our treasure map to finding God. So honor is a continual thing, right? Paul, in writing to Timothy, says, honor widows who are widows indeed. But if any widow has children or grandchildren, they must first learn to practice piety in regard to their own family, and to make some return to their parents, for this is acceptable in the sight of God. I like this here. To make some return to their parents. That idea that something has been given already. But to look after them in their older age. I think we see a great example of this. Again, we'll use this Jesus guy. He passed the first test. He was a good example. Let's use him again. In the Gospel of John, chapter 19, verse 26 to 27, it says this. This is when Jesus is on the cross. When Jesus then saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, "Woman, behold your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Behold your mother." From that hour, the disciple took her into his own household. So at a time where Jesus, no one would fault him for being a little bit selfish, going through what he was going through on the cross there. But we see he's forgiving those who did it. He's having conversations with those hanging there around him. But he's honoring his mother here. He's looking after her, making sure that she is taken care of. That's pretty amazing. Our last verse today. It continues on that first commandment with a promise. It says, so that it may be well with you and that you may live long on the earth. God understands that he's writing to children here, so maybe he has to dangle the carrot a little bit more on that incentive. What does it mean that it may be well with you? Does that mean that by following God and being obedient to your parents and honoring them that your life is going to be smooth sailing? I don't think so. I think when it talks about being well here, it is that the child will be fulfilled in their life because they are walking with God. They are following what God wants them to do. They are in obedience to their parents. They are in obedience to God by doing that. They have a peace about their life, knowing that they are walking with their God. How about the guaranteed long life part? Is that a guarantee? I see it more as probably a generic rule than an absolute here. This quote from Paul is a little different from the original one. The original one talks about the Israelites living long in the land that God would give them, the land of Canaan, the promised land there. But is that what he's saying here? Obey and honor and live to 100? I'm going to explain a little more why I think that's more of a generic than an absolute, because we all know those, sadly, who have passed prematurely in life, and those who may be Christian and may be full of obedience and honor, right? So I don't think we can paint with that same brush and say, oh, they must have been disobedient. What do parents want for their children? They want you to be safe and they want you to be healthy, right? That's why they push the peas on you and not the cake all the time, right? That's why they maybe say to you, and say you're in high school and you want to head out to this party, that's why they say maybe, no, I don't feel comfortable with you going. You can't go because, there might be substances there that we don't want you getting into, that you're not legally allowed to get into. Of course, the kid hearing that, it's the end of the world for them, right? It's like, oh, I hate you, you're the worst, you don't understand nothing. Who's ever said those kind of words to their parents in an argument? I think that's what we can see here, but why? Why would a parent say that? Why would they put the clamp down on their child? Maybe because they want to keep them safe. Maybe because they want to use their own mistakes from the past, their own experiences, the wisdom that they've accrued from going through those things to help their child not go through the same errors. Say this person sneaks out and heads out to that party, right? And they get involved in things that they shouldn't. And they get in a car after that and they drive and there's an accident. And their life is ended, right? It really is the end of the world for them. That's where I think here, in following our parents' guidance, we will be put on a path we can have a lot better chance of having a longer life. Dangerous living raises the odds of a shorter one. So we need to be considerate of what our parents are saying because they want to keep us on that safe path. Now, this one's really more so for teens, but it can be for older than that. Remember we talked about when kids lose that view, that awe of their parents there. And as one who did dip his toe in the waters of the other side, my suggestion to you is for children, you don't have to be a prodigal. You don't have to be a prodigal son or daughter. You don't have to go and see what the world is offering. If you are already in Christ, you are already on the right side. I want to provide you guys with a little bit of a jingle, something to keep in your mind in case that temptation comes, that worldly temptation. Who here knows the movie The Greatest Showman? A few hands, not as many as I'm hoping. We'll see how this goes. Who here knows who Zac Efron is? A few more there. I was kind of thinking I'd hear some girls scream a little bit, but Zac Efron's character in that movie, he's having an argument with Hugh Jackman's character, P.T. Barnum, and he's wanting him to do something he doesn't want to do. So this here is a little jingle for the Christian when you're feeling that pull, that temptation for the world. It's just a simple line. When you already know what you have, you say, I have what I need and I don't need to take a ride. I don't need to see the other side. No. I'll stick around for the singing and learn there, I promise. But that's just a cool little thing. Sometimes, the song and stuff can stick in our mind like a bracelet or something. We can remember that we're on God's team and that we don't have to taste of what the world is offering to know what's better. We already know it, right? We already understand that. We're getting there. We got the treasure chest coming across. We're basically in closing moment now. We got our two keys of honor and obedience, but there's a lock on there. This is my abstract way of transforming into another example. I want to talk about locks for a bit, specifically the 4 lock children. And I've gotten their permission. I got the permission from the patriarch Tim to mention this story. So when I started coming or attending in Carmen, there was always this tale that would be on the wind almost, and it was like folklore that there was these angelic lock children who were so well behaved. They were so obedient to their parents. They sat there so nicely when other kids would be running around. They were polite, right? And I was just like, nah, that's not a thing. Like, kids don't do that. And sure, they were younger at the time. But it's just a small example that you can have that obedience and that honor at a young age. We still talk about it there. So it's had lasting positive effect. And so that's a commendable thing. And that starts with the parents, but it's also the children's decision to be obedient, right? A commendable thing. And it lays a strong foundation because what do we see? Do we see the locked children here? Yes, we do. In a world where parents are sitting here still in the faith, but their children have fallen off and left the faith completely. We have 4 for 4 here, still faithful, because that strong foundation was laid and they made the choice to follow in that. And that's an amazing thing. Obeying God's word works, I guess. That's our big conclusion here as we finally reach it. Let's remember what every parent wants for their child, right? From Luke 2:52. They want them to grow in wisdom and stature. They want them to find favor in society and favor with God. The child wants these things too. Have you ever heard them say, I can't wait to grow up? A Christian child will want these exact same things. For the child, the relationship with the parent is the introduction to relationships in general. It's that dynamic that helps them understand their relationship with God, what kind of viewpoint they're going to have on it. I know we've talked a lot about the position of the child today, but we all do have roles that God has assigned us to play in maintaining and achieving this harmony. So to the believing child, your call is to simply obey and honor your parents. You may not agree with every choice they make, but especially while you're under their supervision, do your best to heed what they say. God has appointed them as your parent or parents, right? So even when it's not easy to see their reasoning, trust your Father in heaven. that he knows and that he understands. And if you have to, just do it strictly to please him. Honor should be continual. Living in your own house away from your parents does not take away your call to honor your parents, right? And maybe the ways that you honor them have changed over the years. Perhaps now you honor them by having them come live with you. Or maybe you honor them by driving them to their appointments. Or maybe you honor them by sticking them in a home. I don't know. I'm just kidding about that last one. But if you have to do that and if everyone's on board, then good. But the way you honor your parents can change, but the call to honor them is still there. There are many ways to do it. Find that honorable trait. Rediscover that childlike view and let it be your focus. Obey and honor God by doing it for your parents so that it may be well with you. The chest is open now. And our reward is parents who are pleased. And bigger than that yet, a God who is pleased with us. Now, the Proverbs have a ton of information regarding especially this relationship between parents and children. And I believe that these 6 verses from Proverbs 3 really encompass a lot of what we've talked about today. It says this, "My son, do not forget my teaching, but let your heart keep my commandments. For length of days and years of life and peace they will add to you. Do not let kindness and truth leave you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart, so that you will find favor and good repute in the sight of God and man. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight." I like that part in there about binding them to yourself. We talked about that last week, Jay did. The phylacteries, can't even say the word, but you know what that is, that Jewish custom where they put something on, and then, so they had it, so it was on their mind. This is a great challenge for us, children, but it is worthy of our effort. And yeah, we'll slip up. We will. But shouldn't a family be the one place where that forgiveness is given readily? It should be. We should be able to trust that it is. We want to govern our lives in a way that is pleasing to God and to one another. A loving parent who disciplines and guides their child is really showing the love of God to them. And in the way that we discussed today, an obedient child honors their parents, showing their love and the love of God to their parent and all who witness that relationship. God truly has shown us the way to grow up. Now let's get someone up here who can sing. Thank you.
Please stand if you can as we sing the